Okay, good evening everybody. We're live on YouTube, so good evening everyone and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Communities Public Protection and Housing Scrutiny Review Board on Monday 30th of September. Given the weather outside, I think we're all probably missing the Assembly Rooms car park for this particular meeting, but great to see so many people here. So, my name is Councillor Matthew Eyre and I'm the chair of the board. I always like to do a round of introductions before we start. I normally tend to go in a circle, but that seems fraught with difficulty in the chamber this time. So if we go from left to right, one row, then middle, then back.
I'm Councillor Philip Ingle, I'm here as an observer.
Hi, I'm Celia Ingle, Vice Chair.
Stephen Falk, Councillor for Alveston South.
Hello, good evening. I'm Councillor Martin Wilson, Chaddiston West.
Councillor Gulfraz Nawaz for Arboretum Ward.
Councillor Kieran Kaur for Normanton Ward.
Verna Bayliss, Director of Sustainability.
Owen Swift, Acting Head of Climate and Environment.
Ian Fulliger, Acting Head of Communities.
Hi, Holly Johnson, Head of Quality and Consumer Regulation at Derby Homes.
And Maria Murphy, Managing Director at Derby Homes.
Hi, Jim Joyce, Head of Housing Options and Homelessness at Derby Homes.
Stephen Mason, Democratic Services Officer.
Fabulous, thank you everybody. So, we'll make our way through the agenda. Any apologies for this meeting? Nope, fabulous. I know that Councillor Pandy is on his way. Late items to be introduced by the chair for this meeting, there are none. And declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest from anyone? Nope, fantastic. In terms of the meeting, the minutes of the meeting held on the 22nd of July 2024, anyone any issues with those? No, fabulous. We'll take those as read and approved. Okay then, so we'll go on to item 5 on the agenda, which is Tenant Satisfaction Measures Results 2023-2024.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to do a very brief introduction before I hand over to Holly to go into the detail. Now, I'm absolutely sure you've all read the report and know exactly what the new tenant satisfaction measures are. In short, it's a new set of measures that have been prescribed by the regulator for social housing following many, many years of the government looking at the standards in social housing. Now, half of these measures are what we call perception measures, and that's done by asking tenants set questions to give their view on how satisfied or not they are with different parts of the service. And then there are a number of management measures. Last year was the first year that social housing providers were required to collect them, and they were signed off by council officers a few months ago and then submitted by the City Council end of June, which was the regulator's deadline. Now, we felt it was really important to bring this to scrutiny to give a wider understanding across all council members of the performance that is happening with council housing. I'm going to just hand over to Holly and she'll take you through them. And I think, Chair, it'll probably work better if anyone's got any questions on the indicators if they shout up as Holly's going through rather than waiting right till the end. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So yes, as Maria said, tenant satisfaction measures. So it's quite a big, exciting time for us to be presenting these measures actually to you today, because we're actually quite proud of the measures that we've got in terms of what we've collected since April 2023, which is when the tenant satisfaction measures came into place, until the 31st of March 2024. So what is part of this report is the end of year position for the tenant satisfaction measures, but we do collate this information all throughout the year, but we are only meant to submit this to the regulator at the end of a financial year. So as Maria said, the 30th of June was the deadline for these. We have done some benchmarking on the tenant satisfaction measures to see where we sit. The benchmarking has been done through Housemark, which is a membership organisation that we pay into, where they collect other providers' information so that we're able to benchmark against it. And we're really pleased to see that we are in the upper quartile of performance, Derby Homes is, compared to other organisations that are part of Housemark. About 100 other organisations did participate in this pilot of the tenant satisfaction measures, so we're really pleased to see that we're performing really highly. I won't go through absolutely everything in terms of the indicators, but I do want to point out just a couple that we're particularly proud of in terms of our results. TPO1, which is tenant participation, it's the first main one, and it's about the overall service that they've received from their landlord and people's perception on satisfaction. And our final result at the end of the year was that 86.3% of our customers said that they were satisfied with Derby Home Services, whereas Housemark said that their upper quartile position was 78%. So it's quite a bit higher. So we're really pleased on that one. Another one that we're particularly proud of as well is TPO8. So TPO8 is about whether landlords agree that we treat them with fairly and with respect. On this one, we actually performed 90.36% satisfaction, whereas the upper quartile of Housemark was 83.3%. So that is one that we're also really pleased with. We've got a bit of work to do with some of the perception figures because, as Maria said, with them being perception, it is quite difficult to get some further analysis on whether or not somebody's gone through a complaint or made an antisocial behaviour referral. So in terms of our landlord's approach to handling complaints, we did get 51% satisfaction. However, when you compare it again to the end of year from Housemark, we're still in the upper quartile because other organisations didn't do so well and got 40% satisfaction. So that is something that we want to do more deep diving on over the course of the year and look at getting some transactional surveys as well to make sure that we're able to support that. In terms of our compliance reporting as well, so when we said with the TSMs, there's some that are tenant participation and some that are managed by landlord. The BSs, as they're called, it's building safety. Those ones do say that we are performing once again really highly. So we have 99.84% of gas safety checks that have been carried out in all of our properties. And that is because there are some properties that we can't have access to all throughout the year. So we're really happy with the fact that it's 99.84 and only 39% of landlords were all compliant with that. But otherwise, we are really happy with all of the results for all of the building safety measures. And then towards the end as well, I just want to draw attention to RPO2 in particular. So that is responsive repairs. RPO2, even though we're not technically upper quartile and we're still median, we actually think that that is because we have been very open with our analysis on this tenant satisfaction measure. Some providers, when we looked at the analysis, have only been reporting that their repairs are repairs that they've carried out within 10 days, and then anything over 10 days, they've claimed it's capital works and not actually a non-emergency repair, whereas we've been very honest and put into this anything from 5-day repairs to 180-day repairs. We've put it all under our non-emergency responsive repairs service. So we think this might have affected the benchmarking results, but otherwise we're really happy with 75% on that one as well. So that is a summary of what we've done for the tenant satisfaction measures. As Maria said, this is the first year of us being able to carry out the TSMs because they only came in from April 2023, and it is part of the wider consumer standards that have come in since the 1st of April 2024. And we will be looking at the results very closely when the regulator publishes other people's results. But unfortunately, it doesn't look like the regulator's in a position to publish any league tables until maybe November time. So we're still waiting on hearing back from how other people are performing. But yeah, that is it. If there's any questions at all. Thank you.
Fantastic. Any questions from anybody at all?
Thank you. It's a really good report, actually. I think Derby Homes are clearly doing a good job. With the perception of how repairs are done, I think that's quite a difficult one to actually get up high, because you've got, you know, if I bring up, say, my boiler's broken and somebody can't come till Wednesday, and it's Monday, I can't have any hot water, so I'll be upset by that. But, you know, just what I'm trying to say is, I don't think I'd lose any sleep over it. Thank you, Chair.
Any more from anybody at all? Yeah, Councillor Cole.
Yeah, thanks for that. I just wanted to ask, so this is people's perception, I understand, so what they believe has happened. So if somebody, whether, you know, thinks that the repairs haven't been done in time, or they've got a very low satisfaction of how they feel any problems we dealt with, are there any plans to go back to them? Are we responding to people about why they might have ticked something as quite low?
So at the end of the survey, we do have to be very careful with what we put in the survey, because they are very specific about how we ask the questions and what we ask. But we do have a section at the very end of the survey that says, if for any reason you're not satisfied in anything that, you know, you've raised with us today, please tell us more information and we'll contact you. So we do have a system in place called customer survey comments, is what it's called, where we basically send out the information every week from the survey to the relevant department of where someone might be dissatisfied, to make sure that they go back and make contact and follow up. So for example, if it was a repair that they've told us they're not satisfied with and it's still outstanding, we'll be able to pick it up as part of that text in the end of the survey and go back and speak to the customer and make sure we sort it out. So then hopefully next time their sample dipped in a survey, it might come off a lot better. Thank you.
Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, congratulations. These are a very good set of results, which I think we can be very proud of. Just a question in relation to NM01, which is about the number of antisocial behaviour cases opened per 1,000 homes. Now, ours is 71.69, if I'm looking at it correctly, which is higher than the median and others. It's not to say that's a bad thing, because it may be that we're dealing with cases of antisocial behaviour where other housing providers perhaps aren't. So just perhaps have a bit more information about why you think it is higher than the median on that marker.
Yeah, I'm glad you've picked that one up, because it is one that always stands out to me. Quite amusingly, the regulator does believe that the more complaints you have, the better it is, because you're showing that you're a transparent organisation and your tenants know how to complain. I guess the issue is, how high do you want high to be? At the moment, hovering around the 70 per 1,000, I kind of feel that we're within the realms of the top quartile, which was 61. But it is an interesting one, isn't it? I do think we've worked hard over the last few years in terms of making it very clear for tenants to complain if they've got a problem. In particular, the hate crime incident. And we've done a lot of awareness raising around what hate crime is, and the support and the measures that we've got available to anyone who believes they are a victim of hate crime. So we were particularly pleased to see that we were up there with the higher performers on that as well, given the amount of effort that we've put in. But it is an interesting one. High is good apparently, but I don't really want to be too high.
May I add one bit to that, if that's okay? I think for me, the difference as well with NM01 compared to CH01, so CH01 being complaints, is that we're quite clear from the Ombudsman on what qualifies as a complaint is any element of dissatisfaction. But I think with antisocial behaviour, there hasn't been a threshold given on what qualifies as antisocial behaviour. So to your point, I agree. I think it's the fact that our threshold is that we are willing to accept more complaints than maybe other housing providers. And because it's not regulated in the same way that complaints is, maybe other housing providers are not providing as high a service as what we are at Derby Homes.
I just think it's a sort of, it leans into things like crime stats, doesn't it? Where does a low recording rate mean that there's a low rate of crime, or does it mean people aren't reporting incidents when they happen? So yeah, you can certainly see how higher one can be good, too high cannot be good, too low cannot be good. Yeah. Any further questions from anybody? Okay, no, fabulous. Well, just to say really, a huge well done to everybody for these statistics. I think we're right to acknowledge there is a bit more to do, but we're certainly starting from a good place in this. We're starting above the higher percentage on a lot of things rather than below it, so really, really good to see that. Just the one question really from myself. So we had, it was 1,810, I think it was, participants within this. How do we get that number even higher in future years? Because I'm thinking, looking at something like this, it's sort of like social media. The people most likely to comment are the people who hate something or the people who love something. And the people in the middle may be less likely to complete it. And it doesn't look like it's the shortest document to complete in the world either. And you don't want people kind of getting bored midway through because they're not feeling strongly either way. So how do we get more and more people involved in this and broaden that sort of spectrum of participation?
It is a good question. I'd say that actually we don't technically need to get any more because the sampling methodology of how the TSMs are carried out are very prescriptive. And actually, we only needed to get 950 surveys for us to be a representative sample. However, for years, we have always tried to aim for about 2,000 surveys a year because we feel like that's a good number for our customers. So actually, we tried to aim for the 2,000 of what we normally get. But according to the tenant satisfaction measures, we only needed to get 950 based on our sample size.
And you have to evidence as well that that sample is representative across all customers. Honestly, the description and the methodology is so nailed down.
Yeah.
There is little room for movement.
Yeah.
So just on that, just completely out of interest, is the questionnaire or survey given out in different languages or in different accessibility formats, things like that?
Yeah, so what we do is we have a list of the sample. So we have a sample of about 3,000 customers, and out of those 3,000 customers, we try to get at least 2,000 people. And what we do is, obviously, because they're our customers, we have that information. So before we contact the customer, we make sure that if there's translation services required or if there's any accessibility requirements, we'll discuss that with the customer before we make the call to collect the survey.
They're all telephone surveys.
Yeah.
Anything else from anybody? No, fantastic. Well, thank you all so much for that report. Really appreciate it and look forward to seeing the stats for next year as well. Fabulous. So move on then to item 6 on the agenda. So the non-shortlist direct offers Derby Home Finder.
It's such a snappy title, isn't it? So thank you. This report is coming to yourselves today on your request from April, where this board requested some more information on non-shortlist direct offers. So just to give you a bit of an overview, every stockholding local authority must have an allocation scheme, and that is set out in the allocations policy. And Derby, we have Home Finder, which is the choice-based letting system, which allows customers a single point to enter into the housing register and allow them to bid for properties. Derby Home Finder is managed by Derby Homes, and the council maintains a joint housing register of applicants who are looking for housing in Derby. So this is a single application that customers can do, and it enables them to access social housing owned by the council, Derby Homes, and also the other registered providers. So we have all the other RPs within the city are signed up to Home Finder. Derby Home Finder partners allocate social housing in line with the Derby City Council allocations policy. So those people advertising properties, they have to comply with our allocations policy. And within the allocations policy, it also provides a criteria regarding non-shortlist direct offers. So section 21.1 in the allocations policy, and I'm not going to go through all of it, but one of the points to raise to you is that we may hold back some properties from Derby Home Finder scheme to make allocations that are at our discretion to support sustainable communities, discharge duties contained in the Housing Act 1996 as amended, and other council initiatives. This may include using properties for temporary housing people where the council has a statutory duty to do so. So that's some of the main element where we will be doing direct offers outside of Home Finder. And so during 2023, 2024, Derby Homes and the council allocated 542 properties, so that was just our own stock, not the other RPs. And so during that, out of that 542, a cumulative figure of 126 were done not through the choice-based letting system, so that is 23.2%. What I should say as well is that within the service level agreement of everybody who are signed up to Home Finder, it is expected that 90% of available properties are put through Home Finder, with 10% being kept back for all RPs to have some management discretion for certain extreme circumstances where they may need to move somebody. So those 126 properties, it's important to point out that Cabinet member approval has been sought during this period of time, 2023-2044, to do non-shortlist direct offers. And if we move to the table, there's an explanation there of what that number breaks down into. So for discretionary allocations, that's a management transfer. So we have a panel for that. We have a discretionary allocations policy that sits for that. And that's where customers have experienced in extreme circumstances in that home and need to move quickly. And Home Finder will not facilitate that. We did 42 for that. Care leavers, we did 17. So again, we've got a robust process with our colleagues in care leavers. So when a care leaver is moving to the age of 17 and a half and needs to be found independent living, we work with them to be able to do through Home Finder to find an offer. Again, sometimes Home Finder doesn't facilitate that, so we have to do a direct offer. And to ease pressures within the existing temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast, we've also done 67 direct offers to people out of temporary accommodation into a permanent home to allow people then to move on from bed and breakfast into that vacant temporary accommodation. I think that's kind of covering it really, breaking it down into numbers. Any questions, anybody?
Any questions for anyone at all? Yep, Councillor Fout.
Could you just tell me, please, the 67 homeless families, and they're not already residents of Derby as such, where do they come? Are they refugees, or what are they, or who are they, shall I say?
The majority of, well, all of those will be residents of Derby. They will be eligible to join the housing register and will be qualifying and would have a homelessness duty owed to them and will be offered and placed into temporary accommodation. So we have numerous people in temporary accommodation at the moment, and that seems to, what tends to happen is the temporary accommodation gets blocked because of the low turnover of social housing. We turned 542 over last year. Probably a third of those were one-bed, age-designated properties. So we have to try and utilise that. But no, they're not refugees, and they are members of the community and eligible to be in Derby.
Any more from anybody? No, fab. Just two quick ones from myself. So in terms of, we've got the figures there for 23-24, looking at sort of 24-25, the number of properties not appearing on Home Finder, would we expect that number to go up or go down?
The number, sorry, not to go through Home Finder.
Yeah, so the number for 24-25, so the forthcoming financial year, so the one we're in, sorry, for that, in terms of the numbers not appearing on Home Finder, would we expect it to be going up or going down?
I mean,
I would expect it to be increasing, because we are not seeing a reduction in the numbers of people being made homeless. We have to move people on from temporary accommodation. So I wish I wasn't saying that, but I think it will increase. That is my honest opinion.
And the sort of the follow-on from that really is, obviously, if that number's increasing, reaching that 90% of vacant social housing being advertised on Derby Home Finder, we're going to get further away from it rather than closer to. What's the way to rectify it, really, other than kind of having more social housing and building more social housing? I appreciate those are the ways. Is there anything else?
You've kind of answered the question there, and that's my stock answer. We need a large-scale Mackworth, Sinfin. You know, we need that again. So, you know, we're always looking at opportunities. You know, we've looked at opportunities with Abbey Lodge, and I'm sure you're aware of that, which is some ex-student accommodation that we've bought, the council have bought, and we're converting that into, you know, initially 46 units of temporary accommodation. Some of those will be up to 7 bed to accommodate some of our larger families. Moving on into phase 2, that will be up to 96 units. So looking at Ian and his teams, we need to buy more, acquire more, stop the right to buys. That's the very small nugget of what we need to do.
So leaning in, just a final point, and leaning into, obviously we've seen in the last few weeks, South Derbyshire and the councils on our borders that are taking elements of our housing allocation with where they're building. How kind of intrinsically in are we with conversations there in terms of making sure that this is involved?
Yeah, we're in conversations with all of them, and we have nomination rights because a lot of those bordering authorities don't have a waiting list like we have, or a housing register like we do. So we are absolutely utilising that. You know, we've done stuff around it at the Alveston area where we've got nomination rights and we've got future plans for more. And some of the ones that we're looking at as well are the larger scale properties, so the 4 beds and 5 beds that they're not dreaming of having built. We're encouraging them to have those larger properties built because we can use them.
Fab, thank you. Anything else from anybody? Yeah, Councillor Nawas?
Do we have a certain number? How much we got in stock? Houses?
What, total stock of social housing?
Yeah.
It's about 12,500. And so out of that 12,500, we turned over 542 last year. And over the last sort of like 10 years, that number's got less and less. And last year was our lowest turnover. Since COVID and the cost of living crisis, people are just hunkering down and staying where they are, council. They're not moving, and the turnover is extremely low. Well, we don't technically have a waiting list, but the housing register got about 8,500 people on the housing register. About 5,500, 6,000 people who are active on that. So we have something called the rolling review. So if you're not active for 3 months, we will explain to you you need to be active, and then at 6 months, if you're not active, we will explain to you we can take you off the account only if during that period a property that was suitable for you had been advertised. So if someone's waiting for a 5 bed and we've not advertised any, we're not going to take them off the housing register. But it's really key that we make sure the allocations policy is fit, that it prioritises those people on the housing register who have got the greatest need, and that's what Home Finder does. So we may have large numbers of people who are on the housing register, but we only offer properties to those people who are in the greatest need.
Can I just come in on that? What Jim's explaining here is just one part of the work that they do in terms of the council's housing stock and the housing associations. But his team also do a lot of work with landlords in the private rented sector, because I think whilst we'd all agree more social housing is needed, we also need to make use of existing stock in the city, a lot of which is private rented, and there's lots of work going on to ensure that we've got access into that sector where the landlords keep their homes to a good standard. But it's really important that as a city we maximise the use of that as well, because you don't need to be a mathematician to do the sums, do you? Just over 500 homes a year coming available, Jim explained. A good third of those will be either single persons or elderly people. 8,500 on the housing register into less than 400 homes a year. It's never going to happen, is it? It just doesn't balance. So we've got to cast the net as wide as we possibly can. And that's a big piece of work for Housing Options, isn't it?
So we have a whole team, which is the private renter sector team, who are constantly working with letting agents and establishing relationships so that when properties become vacant or become available, that our nose is in that door. And we have a grant that comes from the government that allows us to assist families to be able to top up the rent if it's unaffordable. So that team are really proactive. Last year we did about 240 private lets. This year we're doing a lot more with the move on, from people from different properties and into shared homes in some of the younger people. So it's a really key part that Maria points out, the PRS team.
Any more from anybody? Okay, no, fantastic. So again, thank you for bringing this report. Very much appreciated. So we'll go on then to item 7. So Derby Parks service update. I know we've got a presentation for this one, so we'll just get that set up. For anyone that's completed their report, I mean, you're obviously welcome to stay, but if you do have something to get on with going to, you're more than welcome to. And actually for that, for the one we've just done, the non-shortlist direct offers, given obviously we raised it at exec scrutiny as something that came from that originally, could we, I don't know if it'd be yourself or Stephen, could we circulate the report to all members of exec scrutiny, just so they've got sight of it? And that way, if there's any further questions that come from that, they can deal with it then via email or anything else. Fabulous.
Thank you, Chair. And good evening, everyone, and thank you. So I'm here to present about the Derby Park service and provide an update just in terms of where we are for this year and the previous year. Just thought I'd give a bit of context in addition to the report, just around what the Parks team or Parks and Green Spaces team does. So there's over 400 green and open spaces in Derby, which is about 13% of the land mass. And there's a range of different things that the Parks team manage alongside our ground maintenance colleagues across the city. And that's everything from nature reserves through to some of the things we might see on some of our more traditional or community parks, things like play areas, skate parks, recreation, leisure facilities, as well as everything else that goes alongside those. So paths, bins, benches, street lighting, and then significant areas of work around biodiversity, tree planting. In addition to that, we also have 21 allotment sites, 19 allotment associations. We have our football pitches that we also lease out. We've got over 28 friends of groups. And in addition to that, we have some recognition for some of our parks, some of our major parks. We have 6 Green Flag Awards, 7 Green Flag Community Awards, and 1 Green Heritage Award for the Arboretum Park. So there's a lot of space, a lot of land, and a lot of things and assets that are managed on those places and spaces. And those places and spaces permeate and reach every member of every area of the city and all communities across all wards and all localities and all neighbourhoods that we have. In terms of some of the things that we try to do to fit in strategically with where we are as a council and as a city, we manage the health and safety across parks, buildings and allotments. So there's a lot of compliance. So we think about some of our play areas, thinking about some of our outdoor gyms, thinking about all the community centres, all the buildings that are on parks. Some of those are managed by the council. Many are leased out to other organisations, groups and community groups. Again, we have all the compliance checks that sit alongside those. Parks team and Green Spaces team play a really, really important role when it comes to the climate change and our biodiversity, and trying to lead some of that work on biodiversity and the decline of that, and how we can look to improve that in the city. There's a lot of involvement with communities, and I think it's fair to say that a lot of what happens on our parks and green spaces probably couldn't happen without the communities and the community's work that leads some of this. So I mentioned and touched on some of the things like the Friends of Group who are critical really in helping to support the development and shaping places and spaces of the parks and green spaces that they look after, they develop for their own communities and broader. In addition, there's also the Derby Parks volunteers, who is a workforce who are volunteers who do tasks on our parks, nature reserves and woodlands, and that could be anything from platforms being built on fishing areas, through to steps being put in, through to fencing, through to hedgerow planting and removal as well. So they play a really, really important role, and that workforce is critical to allow the volume of work that was on the previous slide to actually happen within the city. And it's really, really key that the team work alongside those communities and those groups as well to really understand the work that they do, and actually helping to support them achieve the ambitions that they want to see for their green spaces within their parks and green spaces. The committee wanted to see an overview just in terms of where we are with expenditure, and specifically thinking about the rolling capital programme that was approved for the parks team. Up until last year, the parks team had a relatively minor works budget and repair budget that was spent on repairing our play areas and our and maintenance on parks, really. Very minor. So that would be things like replacing things essentially just for health and safety reasons. Last year saw the introduction of a £250,000 rolling capital programme, which is really significant and extremely welcome, to help support raising the standard of the quality of our places and spaces, but also thinking about how can we start to raise the quality to the standard so it is at a good rate and a good satisfactory rate for something that our residents and communities should be having on their parks and green spaces. But then also then thinking what's next in terms of development thereafter. And this year, seeing the doubling of that capital rolling programme, again, really significant. So what the team have been able to do then is start to structure the investment in terms of actually where that can start to be for thinking not just around improvements, but also thinking about where we can start to do some of those enhancements, but also utilising that capital funding to lever in additional funding and revenues as well to, I suppose, to get the biggest bang for our buck on that. And so for this year, the programme was split into three areas of key spend. One was around parks, paths improvements, minor works capital programmes, play areas and sports facilities. So the parks and the path improvements, it's probably not the most exciting stuff, but it's really critical for allowing that accessibility and usage of some of our places and spaces and sites. We know the benefits of what just having circular paths on park can do, but making sure that they are accessible and good quality as well. So if there are people with mobility issues and wheelchairs, actually they can access these green spaces. So there's over £120,000 allocated to paths across the city. Some I've put there just in terms of some of the big chunks of work. There's also minor work that are taking place across the wider city. Minor capital works, bench replacements across the city. Actually, it does seem quite small, but benches play a really important role for people to actually just spend some time within their parks and green spaces. Allotment works, as I mentioned, we've got 21 allotment sites. We do have some of those that are managed by associations, however, they still need the improvements. And because we've not had the rolling capital programme for a number of years within parks and the lack of investment there as allotments, just as some of our other parks and green spaces probably suffered as a result of that, but only being maintained to the level that they have been or been managed to be developed through some of our associations and some of our groups and friends of groups. And then we have play and sports facilities. So a couple of key play areas that have been penciled in for development this year, where we have the Arboretum play area, Alveston play area. There's been an allocation of the rolling programme that's gone into the development and funding of those play areas, but that's actually a minor part because we've been able to lever in other funding such as Section 106 or National Lottery Fund, which has made up the bulk of the spend on those developments. I'll come on to the next bit in a second, which is around local play determined by an inspection report. One of the pieces of work that we've been doing this year is to have an inspection report on all of our parks and play areas in the city, of which we have 88, to determine their quality, the distribution of where they are across the city, their play value and their accessibility as well. So actually, we have 88 play areas, but how good are they? What's the value of those in terms of, how accessible or appealing is it to those communities that they're actually there to be serving? And actually what recommendations should be done in terms of improving those to think that they could play a better role as a community asset. And we've also got some further works penciled in to look at where we have to replace things. So for example, Vicarage Road to replace the Addy Zone. Addy Zone probably put in about 2010, so 14 years old. The equipment is all dilapidated and unsafe, so they need to come out. So that's been a priority, and this capital rolling programme has allowed us to do some of that. Coming on to see what some of the highlight projects were for the last 3 years. So this is a snapshot. 3 years is a big time, but some of the highlight projects in terms of play and open spaces, there's been significant improvements in terms of paths and surfacing. Again, as I mentioned, they play a really important role. I've probably used this example a number of times of where there was a circular path put in at Sinfin Moor Park, where there's a number of people that have gone to that site and lived in that community for years and never actually been to the other side of that site. There's a path in there, they follow it, they walk around. And the value that that's actually playing in that community now is significant because actually they're going and using that space, getting the physical activity, the benefits of being outside, and the mental health and well-being. Play area improvements across the city. It's worth noting that where play area improvements have taken place previously without the rolling capital programme, we've only been able to do that as a result of having either external funding coming or Section 106. So therefore, in terms of us being able to have a coordinated, targeted approach to how we develop our places and spaces, it's been based on where the funding's targeted, which has been the detriment actually probably for the rest of the city, where there's certain places or spaces that may not get Section 106 allocations or other funding that's come in. Sports facilities, I've probably got to mention the Derby Racecourse Hub down at Chaddeston West, primarily because I helped lead on that project, which is a significant investment into the city, as well as some of the other sporting facilities that we've also then tried to look to do and utilising external funds to do so. So things like our improvements at tennis courts, working with partners such as sporting communities to develop the play zone and Cruyff courts down at Normanton Park. And I think a really big one that's happened over the last 12 months as well is seeing the high ropes reopening at Markeaton Park after a couple of years of being closed and shut. Actually, one of our flagship regionally significant parks. Seeing that facility come back to life and a local company being able to do that, I think has been a great offer to bring back to that space. Our natural and semi-natural green space and environment. Sure, everyone's aware of the work and the nationally significant work that's happening around the Allistory Park rewilding and the continued partnership approach to develop that site. Really important about the learnings as well that's coming out of that project is that we can start to take those into our places and spaces across the entire city. So thinking about how we are managing and maintaining areas and spaces, thinking about the biodiversity impact that is having, how we can then start to take those learnings into some of our more urban areas in the city. And I think that's some of the plans that we do have coming up in the next 2 years as a result of that. We've been able to do a number of community gardens through things like Parks Levelling Fund and additional external revenue as well. And a significant programme of tree planting. Trees are seen sometimes as maybe the silver bullet to help with climate change. It's certainly one of the key ones, and actually something that we should all be doing. Within that, we've managed to look at all of those whips being planted, 530 large trees and 182 community orchards. Again, playing really, really important parts to making our places and spaces probably a bit more attractive and a bit more unique as well, rather than just being closely cut grass. Buildings and community centres. We have a number of buildings and community centres on our parks and open spaces, and actually we work really, really closely with a large range of different groups and organisations about the management and maintenance of those sites. And actually they do it really, really well. The ownership of those communities going into those sites and developing those sites alongside the communities that they reside in, is seeing really, really great results in terms of the success of how those facilities and those spaces are being activated and are working. And there's numerous examples across the city. And then in terms of our priorities for the next 2 years, overall, I would probably say the development of a parks and green spaces strategy. This year has probably been an interesting one, I'd say, for the Park Service. There's been some significant changes in terms of the leadership and management of our Parks and Green Spaces team. So we've got a new head of service, we've got a new Parks and Green Spaces manager, and actually what we want to become is more sophisticated in terms of, one, what is our strategic priorities for Parks and Green Spaces? What are the key themes and the priorities that are then going to help drive, one, the work, but also the investment decisions around how we maintain, develop and create our spaces with our communities. So work has already started on the development of this and the underpinning plans that sit within that, including looking at our biodiversity action plan, looking at our playing pitch strategy, looking at our grassland management plan, and also the work around our play inspection report as well. So that play inspection is really, really important because that's allowing us to really assess the quality of our sites and think about the what next, and where do those play areas actually nested, what's around them, how much of a community asset are those places and spaces, and what else needs to go alongside the capital works to really activate those spaces to be really good community assets. We're continuing the development of our community sport and leisure facilities, places and spaces, including continuing the delivery of the Play Zone programme. Initially, we've had Normanton Park that's opened this year, and working alongside sporting communities. We're now looking at Alveston Park, and hopefully we'll be starting to work on that this calendar year. and also then looking at potential other couple of sites across the city as well, working with our local communities and the Football Foundation on those. We'll continue to keep doing the work we are doing and the important work around our climate and biodiversity. Again, all of this working in partnership with our key partners on that, no more so than the work around Alesbury Park rewilding. And there's a really great piece of work happening there around climate change linked to that project, and actually how we start to take all of the learnings that we're seeing from Alesbury Park, but then we take that into communities. So that climate change work isn't based around Alesbury rewilding, it's around what are we understanding, what are we learning, and what can we then start to take into communities. So it's not just around Alesbury and Alesbury Park, it's around the rest of the city as well. And that's where we'll start to see the work over the next 2 years roll out from there. And I think it's fair to say Mark Eaton Park and Monday Play Centre is a significant priority for us. This year we were unable to open the paddling pool due to surfacing issues. As a must, we need to try and get that open for next year, so it's open for the community. But we're also then looking at doing is developing some options appraisal work around Monday Play Centre and the potential future options for its redevelopment to bring that up to the standard that it probably needs to be to match the region's significant space that Mark Eaton Park is. Thank you.
Fabulous, thanks for that presentation. Any questions for anybody? Councillor Pandy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. The market and paddling pool, or what are you doing actually to make sure that it will be open in 2025? And any insight into why it wasn't open in 2024?
So we are working with the contractor, and it was all about surfacing. It was all about the surfacing. So we had some resurfacing works done last year, or they started in 2003. And because of the conditions of where to be able to do that surfacing work, it needs to be dry, it can't be wet, it needs to be a certain temperature. We found that the surfacing work was done, the paddling pool was filled, but then the surfacing work started to come away, so it made it unsafe, so we had to drain it. And we had to do some inspection tests on that, and I think about 2 or 3 different surface types went down by the contractor, but none of them was sticking to the base foundation, and we couldn't understand why. So our contractor has now done some further chemical tests and analysis of the base, the concrete base, which has probably been down there since about 1950. They've done a sample of that, and that seems to have stuck, so we think now we have a resolution to that.
So, obviously the paddling pool is quite old and it's been functioning for all those years. How come this problem only happened this year?
Yeah, so some of the surfacing had gone slippery. There's almost like a bit of a grip on the surface, but that was gone. So the paddling pool surface just needed to be relaid. So a new coating needed to go on there. So the pool was drained, and then the new coating that went on just didn't adhere.
So does this service not happen every year? Because I think the repair work takes place every year. So has it not been happening every year?
No, there's not a new surface that's applied to the paddling pool every year, no. There's not a new surface that's applied.
Councillor Nowes?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a few questions about the best park in Derby, the biggest park as well. That's our Breton Park. And, you know, nobody cares about that park. You know, the benches have been broken for years. I've been reporting. Nothing's been done about benches. I don't know why. And other parks you look at, you know, others in the city, they're all right, you know, they're done straight away. And toilets, you can't use them in the summer. And nobody goes in the winter in there. And, you know, it's the oldest park we've got, and we need to look after that really well. And, you know, I don't know why it's not treated properly. The Breton Park, yeah.
Yeah, okay, I'll probably take that in 3 parts. I couldn't possibly comment on benches not being replaced, or where they may not have been in previous years, but we do have a programme in place now around bench replacement, which I alluded to in the presentation. One of the things that we did pull out from the play inspection report that we've just had done this year is that the park, the play area in Albury, that was probably the last one to be updated, so that's why there's a significant programme going in there this year to really develop that play area and that space to make it an inclusive, accessible space. And then in terms of the toilets, There have been some challenges and some issues with that toilet. They have been open this year. Unfortunately, there was a bit of an incident that took place there, so they've had to be closed for the time being. But working with our locality neighbourhoods team, we do endeavour to try and keep those open because they play a really, really important role and space and valuable asset, I suppose. That's that park and that community.
Yeah, but the toilets, they're open from 10 till 4 o'clock. And nobody goes between those times. Everybody uses the park in the afternoon and evening when the kids break up from school and they come, the park is full. And by 7 o'clock, the park is really full on a good day. And it's not used. And the benches, I've been making complaints about it since 2022. No work's been done on them.
I mean, in terms of the toilets, there is a capacity issue and a staffing resource that does need to happen for toilets to remain open. And then that's where, say, working with the locality teams and the neighbourhoods teams, we've been able to have some interim opening during summer hours for those peak times. So that has happened last year and this year. But in terms of the benches and replacement, happy to pick those up as a conversation outside of this, if that's okay, and we can actually do a site visit, have a walk around, and we can actually have a look at where some of those issues are, if that's okay.
Any more from anybody? Yeah, Councillor Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's great that there's now a capital budget allocated for parks again, which is thank you, Councillor Ingle. What I wouldn't want to happen is to sort of lose sight of other external funding opportunities that are out there as well. So it's really, looking ahead for over the next few years of opportunities arising with the lottery and so on. Is that funding in a good position? Because I know it has been difficult for some lottery and other funders. It's been very competitive. So are we still sort of looking at those opportunities and going for them as and when? And have we got the capacity within the council to be able to do the bids and the administrative side of things to give us a good chance of being successful?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of the things that we do quite well, actually, in terms of being able to lean on and pull in that external funding. And really, that's usually the first point of call. So actually we utilise as much as possible external funding and opportunities to bring that revenue or that capital in, and then utilise what we may have internally. Sometimes that might be matched, and sometimes it might not be needed at all. And some of the examples that were on the screen before in terms of the last 3 years, I think we've probably pulled in quite a large substantial amount of external funding. And most of the projects actually that you will have seen that we've got either planned in for this year or coming up in the next 2 years all have large significant elements of capital funding and or revenue funding attached to them. And I think more so as well, what's really important, that we're just trying to be more sophisticated in terms of how we're managing and maintaining our assets. And I think that's where, as talking before, where the rolling capital programme has been really helpful, because that's allowing us to bring up to a certain standard some of our assets, like our play areas, some of our outdoor gyms, some of our places and spaces. The external funding is where we can really then start to go to town and start to do them real enhancements and developments, which were probably more above just the health and safety work. And we need to do it as well, because we recognise we've got some places and spaces and some facilities and some assets on our parks and green space which aren't great, and actually look a bit sad. And I was only out with the Councillor Ingle and Councillor Ingle a couple of weeks ago looking at a couple of sites, and they look sad, they look tired, and we have a responsibility to really think about how we really work alongside those communities to try and bring those assets up to be something that's fit for purpose and something that you want to see and you use as well. So,
thank you. I just wanted to ask you, because you're saying about setting hundreds and thousands of trees, which I totally agree with. The problem I have in my ward, with it being quite a settled ward, Alveston South, there's a lot of trees that are overgrown now, and it seems to be that the council don't want to trim them, cut them, do whatever. I understand that, But by the same token, I'm just dealing with a resident, and I feel quite sorry for him because I don't know what the resolution is going to be. But it's on the pavement outside. He's had cells put on the roof.
Solar panels.
Yeah. And the tree's grown over those. It's coming under the wall into his garden. And what I would like to say that going forward, where you're building all these houses and everything, which is, again, a necessity, but can a little more thought go into what sort of trees are put into what location? Because it's probably not going to bother me, and it probably won't bother you, but when these trees grow to their full fruition, they cause no end of trouble, and then nobody seems to want to take responsibility for these trees now, because it's just, it's not the way of the future to cut trees or cut them back over much. But as I've got no end of residents that complain to me, and what can we do? And I say, well, not a lot, because nobody's interested in cutting them. So the main point is, can the right trees be put in the right place so as we've not got the canopy right up that's blocking houses out? But also, what's going to happen with all these problem trees that I do have, that people, all I get back from the council, no, we don't cut trees, we don't... what's the answer? That's all I'd like to know, to go back to tell the residents what is their resolution.
Yeah, well, I think there's probably two things I'll pick out of that. I mean, in terms of that specific case, happy to pick that up outside of this if that's okay. In terms of maintenance of trees, we do have our arboricultural team who do maintain trees, and they will do tree inspections and tree inspection reports. So they will assess what might need doing to a tree, because trees do need maintaining. They're not just left to grow. You know, they are maintained in a way that helps them develop and thrive, as well as maintain them so they are safe. So we do have an arboricultural service that does that, and they're a really talented, knowledgeable team as well. So in terms of any new tree planting that actually happens, they are central to that, and they play a really, really important role. So they're not there thinking we can put some poplars in and it might be near some houses, and actually in 35 years when it's not our problem, actually they think about the species and the proximity to residential housing in urban areas. So the species are picked based on where they are going and what the future maintenance of those will be. Unfortunately, trees that have been planted 30, 40 years ago, they can't really do too much about that. And Derby's a relatively densely populated area in urban, so they do try and maintain them as much as possible. And as I say, do that in a way that's safe, and will deal with safety issues first. But yeah, in terms of future tree planting and where they may go and the species type, yeah, really experienced, really knowledgeable, and that's what is taken into consideration to make sure that we're not sat here in 40 years' time having that conversation.
Anybody else? No, Fab, just a couple from me really. So the one thing I have to disagree with is the idea that park pathways aren't fantastic. They absolutely are. And I think the new park pathways in Oakwood Park have revolutionised that park for a lot of users. We've also had, as you mentioned on there, the changes to the community rooms and some new play park equipment as well. All of those have come from the Section 106 budgets. And with a bit of top-up from neighbourhood board funding as well for the play area equipment. When I've been having a look through some of the Section 106 figures, and forgive me, I've had to use the February figures, they were the only ones I could get hold of, there's sort of huge amounts of money in some wards. I mean, Sinfin's got quite a bit, Spondon's got quite a bit, Arboretum, Blaegreaves, a few wards have got big chunks of money in Section 106. We nearly lost a big chunk of Section 106 in Oakwood because we couldn't get things moved forward in time, we couldn't get things progressed in time. Thankfully, we got it all spent in the end. But when there's some big chunks of money that are coming up and your deadline's approaching quite quickly, how confident are we that we're not going to lose any Section 106 money to developers?
Yeah. Thank you. And was that specifically in relation to parks and open space as well? Yeah. And I think that's where, coming back to the point I was making, where big focus and priority from me leading the service really is around what is our plan around parks and green spaces, because we have had limited resources, limited capacity, actually that capital to really think about how we are improving our places and spaces, is that we've been reactive. and actually being, okay, if there is some Section 106 money, then actually that's where we've been able to have to go with the work, but actually not having the capacity to then do it. Having the rolling programs when we've been able to bolster our capacity, and having the more strategic, coordinated approach to our parks and green spaces will mean that we can start to then develop almost like ward investment plans that will look at each individual ward, thinking about the parks and green spaces in those areas, working with ward councillors and the community about what the priorities need to be for those green spaces. So actually we have a list of projects, they may be small, they may be big, around certain improvements, whether that's play areas, paths, etc., that we can agree, and actually that will be the list, and that we start to work. So actually when those opportunities are there, and there is things like Section 106 money, maybe time expired, that's where we can ensure we're focusing priority and resource to deliver those projects.
And the second question really comes in around that Councillor now has brought it up as well, is around councillor involvement in some of this. So again, to use a sort of Oakwood example, we've got some gym equipment on our park. Gym equipment is fantastic, the surface under it is abysmal. Sort of a few months, 6 months out of the year, you can't use it at all. When we've had discussions around, well, can we get some better basing, the suggestion's been, well, neighbourhood board money should be used for that rather than parks money. Now, I get the thought behind it, but from our perspective, when we're looking at the new bench strategy, we would have said, well, we could get some brand new benches with Oakwood on the back of it from our neighbourhood board money, and then that money could, instead of being used on that, be used for the basing on the gym equipment. Obviously, I know in budgets it's not always as simple as that, but where's the kind of council involvement to say, well, on our list of projects we've got, this is what we've got in Oakwood. Are these the right things? Do you think we should add to it? Do you think we should take away from it? When sort of the involvement for all councils in that, because we've all got suggestions around the best things for our parks. And, you know, the residents come to us more than anybody, so we're probably some of the best placed people to put into that strategy. When do we plan on having that sort of engagement rather than being kind of told these are our priorities for the park in your area?
Yeah, we'll be doing that as part of that development of that strategic approach. So between now and probably the end of March, I think that's where they will start to draw up that list of initial priorities. And that'll also be linking into the work that we're doing around neighbourhood plans and the roadshows that are happening around those as well, because those neighbourhood plans need to be part of, well, the parks and open space development work needs to be part of that, because that's the neighbourhood plan. That's what the ward plan needs to be, rather than these two things being separate. So conversation with colleagues internally is what we'll seek to do, is embed them within the neighbourhood plans, and actually as ward councillors, and actually that's the list of projects that then improve for that area.
Any more from anybody? No, fabulous. Well, thank you very much for that report and for the presentation. I think the big takeaway from us as a board is to maximise that councillor engagement in all of this. We've all got ideas, we've all got suggestions. We know from what residents tell us what the priorities we think should be. Let's see how we can fit those into the plan for parks.
Yeah, thank you. And if anybody does want to have a little walk around, site visit, please do get in touch. More than happy to do that, and really welcome it as well.
Fantastic, brilliant. Fabulous. So that takes us on then to item 8, the work programme 24-25. So we were, for this meeting, going to have a report on encampments. Due to a number of reasons, we've had to move that one either to November or to January, so that report is coming. I don't know if we've got the list of things there. Does anyone have any other suggestions for things to put onto the work programme, either for the next meeting or for a future one? I'll take that as no for the moment, no problem at all. So I'll make sure there's stuff on there if not, but I don't want to set the agenda on everybody's behalf. So if anyone has any ideas, just email myself and the Vice Chair and we'll look at what we can do to get those things on there. As I say, I'll make sure there are things on there if not, but we're always open to make sure that every member of the board can put something forward. Okay, fabulous. Thank you, everybody. That concludes us through the agenda and formally concludes the meeting. Thank you all.